C4. ST. Battlefield 6. Why? Why are you so disgusting and so brilliant at the same time? Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Drew here. I've played Battlefield 6 for over 60 hours now, and I have a lot of questions about this game. For example, why does the Egyptian map look so cool and atmospheric, as if tourists were being ripped off at this bazaar 10 minutes ago, while the large New York map looks like it was blatantly stolen from Spider-Man, not the 2018 one, but the one from the PS1? Why does shooting sometimes feel magical and vibrant, while other times the weapon in your hands turns into a child's shooting stick, shooting bullets straight off the target? Why did the cats and animators get into a fight in the hallway with the gameplay animators after the game's release? Who's to blame? I think I know who, and I know why. And now I'm going to share this invaluable information with you, my dear viewers. Some of you definitely noticed that many of the funny moments in the launch micro-trailer were taken from the single-player mode, while almost all the cool ones were taken from the multiplayer. And that's true, but my god, how the internet community still underestimates the single-player mode of Battle Royale 6. It's hated profusely and called mediocre, but I consider it an unintentional masterpiece. And you absolutely mustn't skip it, because I haven't experienced such intense emotions since about the time of the MV3 remake and Gollum. Moreover, unlike many other bloggers, I'm going to take a risk and say something positive about this storyline. On the other hand, some people go out of their way to glamorize, defend, and justify the multiplayer, even though it's far more problematic than we thought after the beta. The thing is, a lot was simply hidden from us. So, I suggest we first have a good laugh at the single player's juiciest and most memorable moments, and only then tackle the multiplayer's numerous woes. Especially since all of this game's problems will ultimately have a common source. So, let's start with the funny, continue with the sad, and finish, I hope, with something pleasant. Well, let's get started. So, the single-player campaign. The plot of Battlefield 6 is extremely realistic. The events of the game unfold somewhere in 2028. The NATO Secretary General has been assassinated, and in response to such a brazen attack, the greatest military alliance in history has decided to hold strict consultations and endure. I'm telling you, we're talking realism here. Due to this weakness, the Union has cracked. European countries emerged from it and began searching for new, more reliable security guarantees, and they quickly found them in the form of a new private military company with the completely innocuous name of POC, or more accurately, PAX, or Armada. This company offered its services to anyone and promised that, unlike NATO, it would definitely not tolerate anyone. Where did this company come from? Where did it get its weapons and heavy equipment, and why was it so cool? Apparently, none of its clients were interested in finding out at first. So what? It's simply a matter of national security, and the opening mission, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't try to protect the player or smoothly introduce them to the situation. No, it immediately sets a very honest and appropriate tone for the entire single-player experience. I'm not going to retell the entire game under any circumstances. We'll select only the most juicy moments and episodes, but the first mission is definitely worth it. We play as a valiant American Marine named Eddie Murphy, stationed somewhere on a NATO base in Georgia. The Sakartvelo government also decided to sign up for a Premium Plus subscription to the Poxbox service, so the Americans were asked to leave the Georgian server. But it wasn't to be. While our patient Marines were gathering their gear, artillery began pounding them. Then a full-scale assault on the base by PMCs began. And then the first and perhaps last star plot intrigue in the entire game arises, which can be summarized as, why the hell? In just a couple of hours, this base would have been yours anyway. Why are you storming it? Are you stupid? Quote. And the answer to my question didn't take long to appear. It came to me as soon as I saw the advancing infantry formats. Apparently, when Vince Zampella left Activision, he secretly took some of his developments with him, and to speed up the development of the single player, he secretly leaked the motive and criterion code for the Call of Duty bots. From Call of Duty 2. Technically, the guy's soldiers know how to shoot, move, and take cover. But there's a small detail. They do this mostly step by step. Their favorite tactic is to think first, take a break, have a cup of coffee, then run somewhere, stop there, think some more, and only then start fighting. And to somehow compensate for their total lack of intelligence, they were implanted with Elon Musk's neural links with a built-in bot and night vision goggles. So the two factors that allow the bots to put up at least some resistance are fairly accurate shooting and their superhuman ability to spot you where you can't see a thing due to poor lighting. They also know how to twist the necks of passersby, attack you backwards, and spin bullets. But that's a whole other, rather grim story. However, our brave Marines aren't at all intimidated by such spine-thrusting cyborgs. So the NATO troops fight their way to the Jeep, and a fascinating 3-minute turret section begins. It might seem like 3 minutes isn't so bad, but, firstly, don't delude yourself. And secondly, those 3 minutes could easily stretch into eternity, because the whole time you can only move the sight, watch the low-budget special effects, fire the machine gun at helpless dummies, and watch this enormous, astronomically large hit marker appear on your screen. Guys, I wanted to ask, why were you so embarrassed about the hit marker being so small? Could you have made it a little bigger, please? For some reason, I can still see where I'm shooting, and while you're watching 6th-generation stormtroopers, powered by a throttle, synchronously and identically blow off tanks, turrets, because creating 2 different animations for tank explosions in a 300 million ruble game would have been just too wasteful. I want to point out the developers' very original approach to the camera work. These guys clearly hired a cutscene director with some experience, one who worked on the Obiva series. It turns out that the Armak guys didn't just attack without a reason, and not because they're completely stupid, although they are. It turns out the Armak guys are planning to get hold of Randy Pitchford's secret flash drive, which the Americans would otherwise have taken with them. Bro, do you even know what's on that flash drive? He knows. And do you know, for God's sake, what's up with the faces? What's up with the shadows? Why are there bits of used toilet paper hanging from the ceiling? What's up with the gameplay animations? Why is the lighting so dull and flat? Why do the enemies act in steps? Why do you have a white border? The number of mysteries is growing exponentially and shows no signs of stopping. Now we'll get to the bottom of the truth. But to get to the bottom of it, what will we need? Free access to information and content, of course. However, as you know, almost half of the internet services used daily, including YouTube and Discord, are still blocked in Russia. However, Amnesia VPN easily solves this problem. Amnesia VPN operates on its own Amnesia WG protocol. It's completely open source, and the app is compatible with absolutely all types of devices, including Android TV. And if you really want, you can install Amnesia directly on your router. A premium subscription to Amnesia gives you instant access to servers in 20 locations around the world, including European, South Korean, Japanese, and even Russian ones. Amnesia offers unlimited traffic for remote access to government services, and the speed allows you to play any game with minimal ping or watch YouTube at 8K resolution without any restrictions. Setup takes just a few seconds. Turning on the VPN takes just one button, and the split tunneling feature lets you customize which websites to access with and without the VPN. Amnesia offers 24/7 live technical support. You can always share your VPN with a loved one or friend, or buy a friend a subscription as a gift by sending them an email with the key and a few warm words of encouragement. And, as always, the promo code DRZ25 you see on the screen now gives you a whopping 25% discount until the end of November. So, follow the link in the description, pay using your preferred payment method, and enjoy free internet access without limits or slowdowns. And we return to the legendary epic battle for Randy Pitchford's flash drive. After an epic battle somewhere in the dungeons of Kazadumai, the developers decide it's time to smoke a little more, which, of course, is the advanced AI of their opponents. And so you defend the extraction point for 5 minutes, shooting back at the enemy cyclists advancing on your position. Naturally, your extraction helicopter takes off only to crash a few seconds later. But young Murphy somehow survives, his forehead pressed against a low-quality texture. When I regained control, for the first few seconds I had no idea what the game wanted from me or why they were shoving my nose into some wires, but I quickly realized I should use the contextual peeking mechanic. Oh my god, I wish I hadn't peeked. My fellow Warfoot and I heroically held the last stand against the advancing horde of Yinsteins, and the Einsteins, apparently observing some unwritten gentlemanly code, didn't try to double tap us with a drone or a grenade, but simply charged straight at us and died, for which, of course, we thanked them. It all ended tragically and heartbreakingly. Everyone except my hero took turns leaving the single-player games and playing multiplayer, and Murphy was left alone in this cursed, story-driven world. But to avoid being alone, he had to think with his head, not get into the company of strangers, helicopters, when the air defenses hadn't yet been destroyed. Don't be a show-off and immediately subscribe to my YouTube channel and my Telegram channel, because we have the most cozy, warm, and toxically lamb video game community, where no one ever feels alone. Maybe a little drunk, but definitely not alone. Well, one of the positives of the starting mission is that they drew a fairly accurate map of Georgia on the loading screen. That's all, but overall, the single-player 6th battle is a gift that never ceases to delight, and each new mission only develops the ideas, reinforcing the need to jump into multiplayer as soon as possible. But you and I, we're not that simple, we don't give up. In the second mission, we play as a sniper who is thrown out of a plane so that she and her squad can prepare the territory of Gibraltar for the subsequent full-scale Silnat landing. And here I was met with frantic gameplay on par with a Dendivian Decant. Gentlemen with epilepsy, I must warn you that this game is most likely completely safe for you. Nothing at all happens here. The very structure of the mission, in the spirit of destroy 4 anti-aircraft guns to prepare the territory for the landing, already reminded me of the golden era of missions from the first and second Call of Duty. And this incredibly engaging structure is repeated here twice. During my playthrough, I was repeatedly struck by the thought process and criteria of the developers at Motive. As we all know, shooters essentially have 2 key mechanics, movement and shooting. And the single-player battle developers were like, oh, what if we added more segments to the game where we forbid the player from moving, so they sit, look around, and shoot. And so, in the third mission, you'll find another 5-minute turret section. While your APC moves forward with cool and pompous style, you furiously lob grenades into the overexposed dust clouds, hoping to hit something so you can break through the Armatov defenses and then begin the assault on City 17. I have to say, Half-Life 2 still looks incredible after all these years. No, seriously. But then the story team came up with an even more revolutionary idea. What if the player can't move or shoot at all for the first 4 minutes of the mission? Oh, and they boldly tested their hypothesis, because at the beginning of the Egyptian mission, you're just driven around in a car for 4 minutes. You guys are smart. Someone's sure to tease me now by reminding me that the legendary 4th Call of Duty, Black Ops, also had a scene where you just sat in a car. Yeah, but that ride was 3 times shorter, 10 times more intense in terms of plot and background events. And those were the opening credits. Do you want to see what the credits are like here? Don't you? Good choice. After a high-speed drive through the streets of Cairo, the developers thought again. Okay, we've already surprised the player with segments where they can't move but have to shoot. We had a segment where they can't move or shoot. What else could surprise the player? Oh, so let's say the player just walks for 5 minutes straight, completely unable to shoot. And you're literally just creeping along with your squad through the alleys of Cairo at night for several minutes. And only somewhere around the 7th or 8th minute of the mission do you start to experience some sluggish, stunted gameplay. For me, this is a true masterclass in managing gameplay tempo. At the start of the mission, your tempo is 0, then it gradually builds to a negative value, and then you press F4 and go play multiplayer. Some people do, but I don't. I endure it because it's my job. I kept enduring, and it was worth it. After all, thanks to my perseverance, I discovered that in this very mission, the developers made a touching attempt to copy the blockbuster room clearing mechanics from Call of Duty. But they didn't copy it completely. Then I had a mission in New York, where I first evicted illegal immigrants and then protected Mr. President, who, judging by his appearance, was also some kind of immigrant, but apparently a legal one. I was protecting him from the Armatovites' secret Caucasian genetic weapon. And now you're asking me, what kind of weapon is that? Well, this is the weapon. A Latina from our squad fell under its influence and became Georgian as a result. After that, Bijou and I were sent running around the park, looking for drone operators. And when I say running around the park, I mean that between drone operators, I literally had a steady 2 to 3 minutes of pure, unadulterated cardio. Oh, by the way, the game has elements of liminal horror. For example, this creepy space next to the extraction point is called Next Rooms, and they talk about him. Well, they don't talk about him at all, because about 4 people have made it to this point in the game, and one of them is sitting in front of you right now. Then the main villain of this whole story shows up at the Brooklyn party. Some Irish analyst with a white collar from Skyports, who was deeply offended by America. So he decides to stab a random bearded American guy, and the bearded guy's leg twitches because it's weak and poorly animated. Meanwhile, a rebellion is brewing in Egypt, and the Egyptian army begins to crush the Armatovites with their tank squads and a powerful, invincible accent. As a former tanker, I was naturally supposed to like the tank mission, and I really did. In this mission, you drive forward and shoot at tanks, but what's even more interesting is that sometimes you shoot at armored vehicles with machine guns, which for some reason shoot back at you. Okay, tanks and APCs, but what are these guys counting on? That I'll get tired of the sound of bullets hitting armor and get out of my tank to ask who's knocking. Meanwhile, allied tanks are predictably useless in this mission, and the air support hovering above, instead of tearing the enemy to pieces with missiles, is also spraying the tanks with small arms. But apparently, they share a common role-playing philosophy with those machine gunners in jeeps. Hello, Carlson, damn it, I've already destroyed 40 fuel tanks solo. I took the Warrior, the Kalibanov Medal, and the Pharaoh Ima TEP Cross. And what are you doing up there? Are you saving your Hydras and half-fires? Why? In case the Megazord shows up or what? Oh, and remember that great tank mission in Battlefield 3 called Fear No Evil, where you lost in the end. So, here you lose too, just not at the end, but in the middle of the mission, when you see that the entire outskirts of the city are made up of the same building, copied 40 times. Even the blankets are drying on the same balconies. Towards the end of the game, you're again tasked with destroying 4 anti-aircraft guns, but this time in an open world, meaning there are vast empty spaces between the guns that you'll need to cross with confident, forced marches. But you'll get to shoot the Switchblade. And such brutally staged content sent my fuck you hormone levels soaring again, but it's better to just see it once. Watch it. And the game's finale is an attempt to depict an epic assault on the aircraft hangars, one of which hides the evil Machicken. You defeat him, but it turns out that your operator this whole time was Krissa, and we'll only see the continuation of this grand plot when, of all places, we never see it again. Oh yeah, and there's almost no music here, because who needs music in an action movie? Lol, of course I did. Maybe it would make the gunfights feel more interesting and dynamic, and we carefully avoided that. And to my surprise, the only people who, for some mysterious reason, gave 100% to this storyline were the guys from the motion capture team, who for some reason painstakingly transferred the actors' movements into the game, as if they were actually working on something valuable, like some kind of blockbuster. And you know why? Because their colleagues from the gameplay animation team simply forgot to convey to them that the planned quality bar had long since fallen by half a shower and there was no need to raise it. I will never forget those great moments of truth, when a really well-animated cutscene abruptly transitions into gameplay and all the characters literally transform from living people into Boston Dynamics robots in a second. But I'll tell you something unexpected. By the standards of a dumb action movie, which this game certainly is, the script itself was promising. I'm serious, I'm not kidding. The premise that NATO's weakening leads to the emergence of an alternative power center seems interesting. The idea that some kind of spycraft might be involved also sounds cool. It's certainly not Tom Clancy level, but it's certainly on par with the Black Ops series. The local characters aren't lacking in charisma either. Hemlock, for example, feels like the equivalent of Ghost on optimal settings, and the members of the Dagger Squad communicate quite cheerfully, pompously, liberally peppering their speech with all sorts of appropriate million-3 organisms. But what I'm about to say now will shock you at first, and then shock you back. The local plot seems absolutely fine. It's normal for an untested alpha build, about 9 to 10 months before release. This is a rough draft of what, after numerous playtests and adjustments, could become a usable storyline. Not exactly good, but usable. When all the drawn-out sections of sitting behind a turret or on your ass were cut down 3 times and replaced with some interesting action sequences, like that car ride on the subway, the enemy AI was slightly improved, at least to the level of streamers in the streamer's box. The lighting model was fixed, the locations were filled with small details, and the animations were adequate. All of this would turn into a decent shooter for an evening. Perhaps you find it strange that I'm now trying to find some potential in such a seemingly hopelessly failed piece of heated Snickers. And it seems strange to me, but this is one of those rare cases where you can clearly see that the problem was a lack of time. Not just a little bit of extra time, but a solid amount, at least 6 months. Overall, it seems as if Battle Royale 6 was originally designed as a purely multiplayer project, and only recently, about a year or more ago, did they decide to put together this storyline at PPH. Or, more likely, the storyline had been in development for a long time, but for some reason they decided to restart it from scratch, right in this time frame. And after the restart, they ran out of time. Reboots of all kinds are quite typical for games costing $300 million. Vin Zampella saw all this perfectly and understood all the problems, because someone who worked on the best story-driven shooters in history simply couldn't help but see it. I told you back in the summer that he tried to get at least some time to polish the single player, or the right to release the story campaign separately and much later, but he was denied, and so we have what we have. So, conceptually, we have a pretty good rough draft, a shit ton of crap, which was sold to us as a fully fledged part of a quad A game for $70. So, of course, no excuses are going to cut it. As the Japanese say in such cases, it's a dreist. But the multiplayer is a completely different matter. If the single player is laughter through tears, then the multiplayer is more about pleasure through pain. At first glance, everything here is absolutely gorgeous. The shooting is very enjoyable, one of the best in the entire series. Beautiful, spectacular destruction that allows you to cleverly defeat enemies, incredibly systemic mechanics, amusing drone and sledgehammer bugs, and a serious focus on classes and teamwork. And the ability to drag fallen comrades out of harm's way is the best innovation the series has seen in years, something we've been promised for years, and which creates a whole layer of dramatic, cinematic situations. It's all undeniably respectable. Well done, Battlefield Studios, beautiful Battlefield Studios. But the problem is that first glances quickly give way to second glances, and when the euphoria of the first few minutes wears off, you realize that Battlefield 6 is like Sweetie Fox. Well, conceptually, it's probably attractive in many ways, but in reality, it's far from flawless. And here again comes the time for a direct parallel with that legendary patience simulator, Dove. After all, to earn the right to enjoy Battlefield 6, you first have to endure Battlefield 6 to the fullest. Endure, dwarves. He who endures, survives. Well, let's just say that throughout history, humanity has come up with many inventive forms of torture, stretching on the rack, waterboarding, car scrapping, Instagram's recommendation algorithm. But even the poor souls from Guantanamo Bay could hardly have imagined the humiliation that every player in Battlefield 6 must endure while leveling up the first 10 to 15 levels of their progression. After BTY, where we were given the opportunity to play as more or less leveled up characters with unlocked gadgets in the release version of the game, you begin your journey from the state of a feral or conscripted Somali homeless person, meaning with a very crooked and uncomfortable weapon, low self-esteem, and a limited selection of available equipment. And this situation will change literally within hours, even tens of hours, because even after all the patches, progression here is quite slow and sluggish. For example, I love playing as engineers for two reasons. I have an engineering degree and RPGs are booming. However, the engineer's starting rocket launcher is a weak child's plaything with a very limited range of applications, while more versatile and powerful RPGs only unlock after 5 to 10 hours of intense gameplay. And all those hours you just endure without the weapon you really want to play with. You think, I could just blast this place with an RPG right now, but you have nothing to fire. I also adore the landing beacon and actually consider it the most powerful gadget in the game, because a strategically placed respawn point can radically change the course of any battle. However, to unlock this beacon in the 6th battle, you'll have to work hard and gain what, ladies and gentlemen? Patience, of course. First, you have to reach a certain level. It was level 20 at release, but they seem to have lowered that threshold a bit. Only then do you qualify for the challenge, which challenges you to emulate Jason Statham and beat up 200 people while under the influence of an adrenaline shot, which only lasts for 5 seconds. Thanks to my adoration of the local shotguns, this challenge didn't pose a huge problem for me. But during the course of it, I repeatedly made a smart move deep into enemy lines and thought, I wish I had a beacon here to slam them in. But I didn't have one, and it was incredibly frustrating. I think you've already caught the pattern. The core, most popular class tools and the most interesting guns are initially hidden from you not just behind a wall, but behind a great wall of grind. Which makes you periodically feel like the fans have erected a helm's mouth between you and feeling, which you must storm with a slanted stock assault rifle. For example, to unlock a 3rd sniper rifle, you first have to unlock a DMR, rack up a certain number of frags with it, and only then will the challenge unlock where you have to get 150 headshots with a sniper rifle at a range of 200+ meters. It seems a bit, well, excessive. No. I mean, it's perfectly doable if you actively play with the right weapon for, say, a week or a week and a half. But signing up for something like that just to unlock one weapon type is a bit, well, excessive. The developers themselves have already admitted they overdid it with leveling and will be revising the challenge system, but I've already managed to level up what I was interested in, so I think I'm entitled to at least something for that. Well, at least a medal for persistent idiot. The second major problem with multiplayer is related to shooting, and it's the so-called ads blom. Also known as random aiming spread, or Adds bloom, for those who don't know, it's a phenomenon where, when firing from the front sight, bullets fly off in a random trajectory, not following a predictable, player-dependent trajectory, but simply flying in all directions. Not because of ballistics, wind, air resistance, or other factors, but simply because large cities present a mystery. If practically every player on the planet hates this random element, why did the developers add it here, and even make it more aggressive than it was in the beta? Well, as I've already said, the thing is, DS Blom solves quite a few problems, not ours, but the developers. Firstly, by using the annoying recoil and its gradual reduction, it's easy to create a vivid sense of progression in the player as you upgrade modules, because the gun, adorned with grips, laser sights, and other gadgets, immediately becomes more responsive, accurate, and comfortable. Although, in reality, it simply starts hitting where you always intended. Secondly, the spread is needed to prevent skilled guys from memorizing the recoil pattern and overly knocking down noobs in firefights. And thirdly, it's simply to make you suffer and feel clumsy. After all, even when you're sure you've aimed your sights perfectly at the enemy, the bullet still misses. You lose confidence, start doubting yourself, your hands, and the rules of this world. You lose track of what's true and what's not. You worry, you panic. Falling is a side effect. Okay, it's not that bad, but when even 5% of your shooting results depend not on you or the enemy, but on a random number generator, it's instability that infuriates and weighs on your mind. In short, Adds Bloom is a skill suppressor, a nerve-wracker, and a useful tool for creating a sense of progress while upgrading your guns. Zombiricic enlightened me in the previous video, and I'm very grateful to him for that. By the way, that Adds Bloom was in almost every Battle Royale game except for V5. But I'm not sure it was as obvious and aggressive. It's largely because of Bloom's absence that many still consider the shooting in Battle Royale V to be the best in the series. Finally, even if I've had scope spread in the series for a long time, that doesn't mean there was ever anything good about it. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever heard anyone say something like, "Oh, slanted aim, that's our Battlefield theme"? No, because it's not an integral part of the series' DNA. It's a World of Test theme. But I'm not sure Battlefield fans would want to move toward aiming circles. Yes, a few percentage points of spread at long range can sometimes be added to limit the accuracy of assault rifles, for example, or to emulate certain physical factors that the game doesn't actually account for, creating, well, a minimal sense of randomness. But the spread shouldn't be aggressive or discernible by players. Players shouldn't feel like randomness is determining the results of their shooting. However, many guns in their starting configurations simply behave like eng pranksters. That is, they're wildly unpredictable and a public danger. When firing long bursts, they're thrown from side to side, and someone smart will probably say, then don't fire long bursts, fire single shots or short bursts. Tap, my dear Pokemon guy, come here, I'll give you a hug. Quote, right, if you're missing a shot, aim better, earn some money. No, go buy one at home. There's just one catch. Those guys with upgraded guns can floor the gas and still score, but you, with your stock slingshot, can't afford to do so, which immediately puts you at a disadvantage. Your damage per second potential is literally lower. The same applies, by the way, to tank battles. In a duel between an unupgraded stock tank and a tank with maxed out active protection and a maxed out rate of fire, there's a clear winner. And that, unfortunately, isn't the one who can tank with a Rambo and a Guslia, but the one with maxed out modules. If you have an active mod, you just press a button and, with a Dark Souls-like sound, parry incoming projectiles, while a stock tank might frown and fart viciously beneath itself. It's very similar. Some might say this has always been the case in the Battlefield series. Well, as always, since the third game. Yes, it has indeed been, but it's been 15 years, and it's time for shooter progression systems to evolve to become more fair. For example, make modules that provide a significant advantage among the first to be upgraded. Or, for example, balance the cooldown modules so that the guy with smokes can use them almost twice as often as the guy with an active mod can use his active mod. And right now, we don't even have that kind of balance. But let's get back to shooting. As you've already figured out, to reduce the impact of Blom's godlike DSB, you need to upgrade your weapons with modules. And Battle has never had so many modules. And that would seem like a plus. And it really is a plus. Modern players, myself included, love to dress up, undress, and customize their firearms. But don't forget this. Modules also need to be upgraded for each weapon separately. And this upgrade is kind of like my weight loss. That is, it's slow, and you're not guaranteed to stick it out until the end. Now, the gun upgrade process to Mastery Level 20 has been sped up almost twice as fast, but the best modules are still at the very end of the progression, and nothing has changed there. And yet, while you're upgrading a new gun, you're still struggling. It's just that after the patch, your time in the Caesar log has been slightly shortened. Moreover, once you level up the gun, the situation becomes unenviable again, because, yes, you'll start hitting and knocking down targets with comfort, but you won't want to switch from that convenient laser gun anymore, because it will mean a new round of patience and suffering, but with a different barrel in your hands. This is exactly what happened to me with the MP5 on the Engineer. I leveled it up, I'm enjoying it immensely, and now I just don't want to go through the same thing, but with a different weapon. But I have to. And many will say that something similar was in previous Battlefield games. Progression, which really decides gameplay situations. But progression in BF3 and BF4 was much more dynamic. You were constantly unlocking something, and there were far fewer modules. That's why it didn't feel like such a big problem back then, but it does now. Again, some of my more sensible viewers will probably say, yeah, everyone will level everything up soon, the imbalance will disappear, and everything will be fine. Wait. So you're saying that if there was no item progression at all and everything was unlocked right away, everyone would be fine right away, right? Well, let's be honest, as much as I love the item progression in Insurgency Sun and Storm, where all the gameplay items were available to you right away, I realize that gameplay critical item progression in major shooters isn't going anywhere in the coming years, because it's one of the simplest and most effective hooks for player retention. Zampella, by the way, also came up with this crap in Call of Duty 4, so I raise a glass to his mother's health. But making stock classes and basic weapon versions so lame compared to the upgraded ones is, to put it mildly, pathetic. At least they don't sell us XP boosters yet. For now, gentlemen and ladies, let's place our bets on when they'll start selling them. I'll leave it somewhere around mid-December, maybe, so you can, so to speak, get up to speed before Christmas and New Year's. However, when you already have a well-assembled weapon in your hands, shooting truly becomes magical. The projectiles travel beautifully and predictably across the field, as if you were placing them in the enemy's body by hand. Scalps are taken one after another, especially with a sniper rifle. Enemies fly off like tin cans. Sometimes it's literally like, bro, where are you going? The guns sound great. The weapon animations are simply wonderful. And I truly enjoyed CQB. By the way, class restrictions on weapons have been removed, but de facto they are still in effect, because signature weapons in the hands of a different class tend to play terribly. For example, those same sniper rifles on any class except the scout now simply miss their target. I'm not kidding. I mean, there's a certain chance they'll literally miss the target every few shots, and that's terrible. Okay, now let's try discussing maps. I'm just about to stop being blinded by the high beams of distant planets' headlights. My god, what kind of shell-shocked, flash drive stunned maniac adjusted the exposure here? Why does one part of the location emit photons in your face like the fourth power unit of the Emergency Situations Ministry, while another part absorbs the entire visible light spectrum, like Regis from Netflix's The Witcher? Why don't objects have any shadows, let alone soft, hard, or liquid ones? What's going on here? It's one of the main problems with single-player and multiplayer, known as the utterly indifferent lighting. It wasn't so noticeable in the beta because we were given the best, most release-ready maps, like Egypt. But when I saw the massive New York City released, the guards, my eyeballs almost bled at the sight of such a huge apple. Because what is this? It's a map devoid of detail, lacking contact shadows, and basically just a bunch of aggressively protruding parallelepipeds with primitive textures. I've seen people justify this by saying that the graphics are supposedly democratic, but no, it's just crap. The same Egyptian map or Tajikistan look much better and deliver a good frame rate. I have no issues with the game's optimization. Moreover, the map's topology is more or less okay. There's plenty of cover, interesting spots, verticality, and flanking routes. It doesn't play brilliantly, but it's more or less okay. However, I get the distinct feeling that the large Manhattan map simply wasn't finished technically and visually in a production state. Even the most polished maps still have significant visibility and readability issues due to poor lighting and auto-exposure settings. Overall, however, the maps here are a cut above those in BF2042 or War Thunder. They're rich, varied, and offer plenty of room for maneuver. There are plenty of interesting cover spots, passages, and small, isolated areas where you can act intelligently and tactically. However, in some places, the combat zones are still too chaotic, like in the residential areas of Gibraltar or these two unfinished buildings in Mirak Valley. Cairo is perhaps the most thoughtful, polished, and visually appealing. It's my favorite map. Brooklyn is fine, but too Call of Duty. Liberation Peak is a bit monotonous, with mountains and rocks everywhere, and the unfinished Egyptian district of New Sobek being the most dreary, indistinct, and self-similar. However, even New Sok isn't as dreary as almost any randomly selected map from 2042. On the other hand, it's also a far cry from the abundance of excellent BF3-style maps. And while the combat locations in BF6 are far from flawless, they're still moderately enjoyable and not as painful as in recent games in the series, so to speak. If the famous Russian cowboy Adam Scott were to evaluate them, he'd say, it's pretty good. BF4-style revolutions are, unfortunately, practically non-existent here, save for this falling crane. However, otherwise, the destructibility here is quite detailed and ubiquitous, with the exception of literally a few load-bearing walls, which must remain on the map for the gameplay to continue to make sense. However, I do miss some large-scale destruction that would change the entire map's landscape. For example, the ability to completely obliterate some high-rise building on New Sobek or on this Tajik map. That would be very, very interesting. However, unfortunately, it's not there yet. And then there are the respawn issues. When you've just respawned, but yeah, that's what I was talking about, yeah, when you respawn on an ally or at a respawn point, there's no question. You accept a certain risk of immediately coming under fire. But when you respawn at a point, the game should ideally take into account the enemy's location, their direction of view, and respawn you in a relatively safe space. Give you at least some time to get your bearings. And, some time, doesn't mean 200 milliseconds, but at least 5 seconds. But the sixth bottle is absolutely merciless in this regard. I'd be shot down, then the enemy would be shot right into my gun. And not only is it illegal, it's also not particularly fair. Oh, and as a great taster of game modes, I can tell you with certainty that the name All Warfare contains a slight hint of, because a truly full-fledged loud warfare mode with all types of vehicles, including armored personnel carriers, tanks, helicopters, and planes, is only available on 4 of the 8 maps. And that's not enough. Battlefield is a game about scale. It's not that there's no scale here, but it's just not enough. I'm not even talking about the variety of vehicles, like motorcycles. Terra, guys, bring back at least the Little Bird for starters, and maybe even the Heimers. In short, at the time of its release, Battlefield 6 was indeed a bit of a hodgepodge, with a bias toward medium to close-range firefights. But I hope they'll soon bring us the Caspian Border, Amman, Tehran maps, and other legendary maps, because the Liberation pick, for example, is already, well, I don't know, it just irritates me. It's a rather chaotic map, where a clear line of contact is almost never established in Conquest, where there's nowhere to hide from aircraft, and therefore, if the pilots are good against you, they will completely dominate. This is quite easy to solve. Add at least some trees or caves to a couple of points so that the infantry has space to escape from this aerial eye of Sauron. And there are also problems with the vehicles themselves. For example, at release, the main anti-aircraft gun fired rubber bullets, and about a quarter of the tank modules did not do what they were supposed to. For example, the field maintenance module, which was supposed to speed up repairs and ammunition reloading, didn't speed up repairs at all, but instead slowed down ammunition reloading. So, which Skillcox Academy graduate got the variable multiplier wrong again? Admit it. And here, ladies and gentlemen, you've fallen into a cognitive trap. You've fallen into a cognitive trap, because just from the sheer volume of time devoted to game criticism in this review, you've likely gotten the impression that I don't particularly like Battle Royale 6 and perhaps even consider it crap. And while I do hate it on occasion, overall, I enjoy it far more. You can go on and on about weapon balance, the code, or the poorly designed attack and defense zones for breakthrough mode. But the fact is, most of this game's problems are minor, relatively easy to fix, and don't particularly detract from its enjoyment. But the core of that battlefield is finally here for the first time in 10 years. And what is this core? It's the atmosphere of a large-scale brawl with different branches of the military and types of vehicles. Clear division into combat roles, creative destructibility, teamwork, and the endless generation of stunning cinematic gameplay moments. I'd rather be shooting down helicopters with RPGs, racking up kill streaks, or creating some powerful, collaborative tactical beauty with friends. Unlike 2042, 6 is a true battlefield and truly the best battlefield since 1, which is only confirmed by its incredible peak online count of almost 800,000 players. Another thing is that being better than 2042-5 isn't the highest possible bar for a $300 million military shooter. I'd love to say Battlefield 6 is an amazing game, but that wouldn't be true. It's a game robbed of its chance to be amazing. And it was the man you see on your screen right now who did it. Zampella asked for more time for the single-player team to at least bring it up to the level of Battlefield 4's single-player, but he was denied. Zampella said the level artists were having trouble getting some maps ready, to which he was likely told that now is the juiciest release window. Black Friday is coming soon, then the pre-Christmas period, which means they need to release the game now to immediately soak up the hype, and then offer some small discounts just in time for the holidays. And the beta was filled with the best and most finished content, resulting in a pre-release aura of masterpiece-like quality and a thick, "we are so back" atmosphere. Regarding "we are back," I completely agree, but "back" is a bit over the top. A comeback is certainly happening, but nowhere near as triumphant as it could have been. Although, considering that Battlefield 6 has already sold over 7 million copies and has almost recouped its enormous budget, from a business standpoint, Andre Wilson did the right thing and simply bribed naive gamers. And now, allocating funds for the game's repairs will be driven not by humanism or love of quality, but simply by a desire to make money in the future from seasons and microtransactions. Therefore, I'm almost 90% certain that no one will fix the single-player game, but they'll still work on the animated series. My relationship with the sixth Potla is roughly the same as that between Geralt of Syria and his beloved 90-year-old pensioner, Yennefer. Look, it gives me plenty of reasons to adore it, but then something nasty happens, and I hate it, and then love it again, and then hate it again, and then love it again. And it all depends on the specific combat situation, the time of day, and my ratio, killing to death. I wouldn't call that relationship healthy. But overall, it's a good game that occasionally allows itself to hurt you, but only because it knows you'll tolerate it, and it's right? But what I'm absolutely not ready to do, don't intend to do, and don't recommend you do is blindly love Battle Royale just because we've had a severe shortage of good military shooters for the last 10 years. A truly decent Battle Royale has been out since 2016, and for some, since 2011. Yeah, right, so what now? Now, why should I forgive any flaws in a game that cost $300 million to develop and $70 for my personal wallet? Almost everyone agrees that the local single player is absolutely terrible and useless. That's true. But I believe it had a reasonable chance of being much better if the developers had been given adequate time to finish the job. So, why do we care why Andrei Pokhomovich Wilson decided to bring us this sweet bread? None, really. The fact remains, it's rubbish. The multiplayer, however, is close to being excellent. Just another 2 to 3 months of active testing, balancing, and at least 2 or 3 more large maps would be perfect. But even in its current state, it's already a very enjoyable shooter. Unfortunately, the game's math, balance, and technical aspects have too many small but incredibly annoying flaws to simply turn a blind eye to them. And the overwrought deblum is a complete disgrace. So, the thorny path that has been traveled, not ideal, not flawless, but finally, the real Battlefield 6 gets a 7 out of 10 from me. Sure, it's a bit of a freak in places, but what can you do? At least it's our freak. And a whole squad of funny battle freaks is already waiting for you personally. On my Parrying boost, I'm
squeezing the bars with my glutes and biting through the hip. Well, look, I'm like in the center of the room now, right? Well, let's pretend I'm on the ceiling and they can't see me. Yeah.
Well, like the beard is hanging down.
Please, let's talk to Elfie. Okay, talk woman to woman.
We have a fantastic, humorous D&D there. New releases of my game, stream recordings, and watching crappy movie content with my commentary, like the aforementioned series Ubivin. The new 4th season of The Witcher is coming out soon on Netflix, where Henry Cavill was replaced with some cute kitten, and I'm eagerly awaiting it. But the 3rd season, with my commentary, is already waiting for you in its entirety on Boosta on Patreon. So come, watch, and enjoy. A subscription only costs about 150 rubles, or about $2, and it helps me feed my wonderful editors, my amazing preview maker, and helps me make videos exactly this long and comprehensive. Guys, sorry it's taken so long with the review, more than 2 weeks, because I'm currently undergoing a course of antibiotics, which is not very pleasant. It reduces my daily stamina by about half, so it's quite difficult for me to work. But I'm trying, guys, I really swear, I'm trying. So if you liked our work, don't forget to rate it. Well, at least a like and a comment. Well, thank you for your attention. Don't give in to this general hype, because it can always lead to premature and incorrect conclusions. And men know that premature is not a good thing. And until we meet again, bye, guys.